The planet Earth was consumed by the water of the oceans. All continents were submerged as the waters rose. Human civilization was submerged, and humanity fell. But marine life thrived and evolved greatly with it. While we see entire cities underwater, we also see two people in diving gear and a harpoon. They are father and son, and they are searching for supplies. They arrive at what appears to be an old convenience store. The son's name is Bota, and he calls out to his father upon finding a shelf full of canned food. The father tells him to take everything useful and put it in the cart. Bota asks what's written on the can, and the father says it's powdered milk. He says that his son's reading is poor and that he needs to study more. Bota sees his father picking up some forks and says they already have plenty and don't need more. But the father says you never know what might happen, so the more, the better. The father says they already have enough, and it's for the son to hold tight. He activates a mechanism and several air balloons begin to lift them to the surface. Bota looks at the city and says it's now called ruins, and that his father tells stories of how in the past all this was a place teeming with people. When they reach the surface, there is a small boat waiting for them. The boat also had a little girl waiting for her father. The father calls her Lita and asks if she found anything interesting, but she says no, and her father says there must be no place for birds to rest nearby. Bota affirms that they haven't seen a bird in months, and asks his father if there really are any people alive besides them, but the father says he's sure there are more people alive, and they just haven't found them because the ocean is too big, and until they find someone the father will protect them with his life. But the two little siblings also need to help each other, as they are all in the same boat. The father was responsible for hunting and repairing the boat. Bota took care of water and food, and Lita took care of dirty laundry and cleaning. Exploring the ruins was also a job only the father did, and it was only recently that he started letting Bota hunt near the surface, and that recently he also could go with his father to the ruins. With a kind of crane they retrieve things from the sea, and inspecting these things is the favorite activity of the siblings. But when the sun sets, they all have an absolute rule to follow. Using watches in the sight of the sun, they all run into the boat. Bota says he forgot to put away the fish, but the father tells him to get in and pushes him down, while slowly closing the door along with the sunset. The night comes with a starry sky, but inside the boat the three are together in silence, when suddenly they feel an impact and Bota says they have arrived. The monsters. Yes, there are monsters in the water now, and the monsters are nocturnal, and we see several of them around the boat. The monsters start banging on the boat, and Bota is very scared, telling the monsters to go away, but his father puts his hand on him and tells him to calm down, that they're just going to bang on the boat out of curiosity and then leave. The father hugged them until the monsters left, and after the situation calmed down the father put the two to sleep. But Bota asks if where his father lived also had monsters. He says yes, since they live anywhere in the water, but he says there were also harpooners who were warriors, who fought monsters to protect the cities, and that he was also a harpooner. This tattoo is the proof. Bota asks what are those strange dots below the symbol. The father says they are not dots but stars, and Bota asks what a star is. The old man forgot that Bota doesn't know what a star is since he's always inside the deck at night. He explains that stars are almost like small jewels shining in the sky. But the siblings are already asleep when the father finishes telling the stories of the stars. He says his wish is to show the two how beautiful it is at night. The next day when they go up to see the boat, the monsters ate even the fish they had forgotten, including leaving claw marks inside the boat. The father says it's not a problem, and he will repair the boat. The important thing is that they stayed safe. Bota asks if the father wants him to go to the ruins to get parts. The father gets angry, saying he's crazy to go there alone. Monsters may be hiding in the ruins. Bota says they were there yesterday, but the father says it's only because he was sure it was safe, and then he forbids Bota and Lita from going to the ruins until they turn 17. Bota starts arguing, saying he's not a child anymore, and he can fend for himself, and that there's nowhere else to go beyond the ruins, as everything around has become ocean. When the father was about to respond, Lita interrupts and tells them to look over there, and she points to a bunch of birds. The father shouts to hoist the sails, that they will follow the seagulls. They arrive at a completely destroyed building that has now become a mini island. The children tell the father they saw people and start shouting, but the father tells them not to make noise and to stay inside the boat, that he will go there to check the building, and if something happens to him, they should flee. The father jumps into into the water and swims to the building. When he gets there, he appears in front of a hole in the building and asks if there's anyone there. No one answers as he sees a staircase. He goes up and finds a green door, and when he enters we see 4 dead people. Meanwhile on the boat, Bota and Lita are happy, hoping they are nice people. But Bota is surprised by something in the sea. He thinks it's a person. Returning to the father, he is rummaging through things and finds 2 explosives. When he notices that the part where he is has a huge hole, that the iron bars are twisted inwards, and outside we see marks of giant claws. The father feels a chill just imagining the monster that did this, and at the same moment, he hears the children calling for him. As soon as he returns to the boat, Lita says that Bota is trying to go to the water, and the father asks why. Bota says there's someone in the water, but when we see it up close it's a trap. The father screams, saying it's not a person, but it's too late. A gigantic monster appears under the boat. The father grabs the 2 children, already anticipating that the monster will. My god, look at the size of this thing. It lunges and grabs the entire boat in one bite. The 3 remain inside the boat, and now face to face with this monstrosity. The monster makes another attack and completely obliterates the boat. Bota falls into the water, but his father is quick enough to grab him back, and the 3 are left on what remains of the rear of the boat. But the monster doesn't even give them time to rest and launches an attack with its tail. So the boat is wrecked and the father and the 2 brothers are thrown straight into the building. Meanwhile, the monster approaches the building. Bota wakes up, disoriented, in his father's arms. He begins to scream his sister Lita's name, thinking she's dead. The father reassures Bota, saying she only fainted from the shock. But it's only when Bota asks if his father is okay that they realize the father has been impaled by an iron bar from the construction, piercing his abdomen. Bota is desperate, but his father tells him he needs him and asks him to take Lita and get out of there as fast as possible. So Bota puts Lita on his back and runs to try to get into the building. The father tries to free himself from the iron bar, enduring intense pain. To make matters worse, the monster surfaces and approaches the father with a terrifying expression, almost his entire body exposed. The father is puzzled as to why the creature is surfacing during the day despite the burning sun. The monster stares fixedly at the iron bar, piercing the father. It starts reaching for its sword on its back, ready to attack, but then it notices Bota and Lita running a bit further ahead. This monster is really smart. It gives a wicked grin, leaves the father, and goes after the children. The father yells for Bota to run faster, and when Bota looks back, fear is evident in his eyes. The monster begins to chase them with its mouth open wide. Bota finally reaches the hole and enters the building. The monster tries to bite them anyhow, and its teeth penetrate the concrete. Seeing its failed attempt, it tries to grab the siblings with a kind of tongue, sensing them and preparing to launch a piercing attack. The monster misses Bota with its attack, but it doesn't stop there. It starts unleashing a barrage of attacks. Bota manages to dodge some while carrying his sister until he finds shelter under a concrete wall. Bota realizes it's gone silent, and maybe the monster has left. When he peeks out, he sees a figure of his father. As he calls out to him, it turns out to be another monster that had disguised itself. Once again, it deceives the siblings with this trap. The father clone begins to disintegrate, revealing that it was actually the tongue that had transformed. It grabs Bota and pulls him out of the building. As the monster is about to devour Bota, his father appears and chops off the monster's tongue with his sword. The monster screams in pain as the father slides the sword across its body. Despite being injured and carrying his son, the father confronts the monster, which looks furious. He tells Bota to stay behind the rocks while he fights the monster. Once again, he's amazed by the size of this leviathan, but he can't dwell on its size because if he dies there, his children will too. The father ties himself with a rope leading to the top of the building on a crane already in the structure. But before reaching the top, the monster is coming towards him, so he grabs a wooden log, and gathering all his strength, he managed to pull out the log and drive it right into the middle of the monster. Bota, who is watching the scene down below, thinks about how amazing his father is. The log gets stuck in the monster's mouth and keeps it open. His father grabs the sword and starts slicing the monster's face. But suddenly the log that the father was leaning on breaks, and he falls into the monster's mouth, being pierced by the creature's teeth. Bota watches from afar the father's last moments. The father looks sadly at his son and remembers the moments he spent with his 2 children and the fear he felt of not being able to protect them. Looking at his son, the father says he loves Bota and lets the sword fall to the ground. He takes the bombs he found earlier, asks his son to take care of Lita, then he explodes along with the creature. In the explosion, Bota is thrown, and the creature falls into the sea. The boy watches as the creature sinks and calls for his father. Now Bota is on top of a small ruin, holding his father father's weapon. He returns to the boat, calling for his sister, and finds her in a corner, crying. He asks his sister what happened and where their father is, and she points to the sea. When Bota looks, he sees his father's body floating, split in half. The girl despairs and starts screaming for their father, but Lita holds her brother back from jumping into the sea. When he looks at his sister, he sees only a skeleton and starts screaming in despair. A storm is falling upon the concrete island.
Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on upcoming videos. Leave a like if you enjoyed it and share with your friends. See you in the next video. Bye for now.